Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth. Let's get into it. Before you hear this one, pay attention to the hour. 2 in the morning is when people stop performing and start revealing what they have been rehearsing in private. A useful lesson from this story is simple. When somebody brings you a comparison instead of conversation, the problem did not start that night. It started the first time they decided your piece was less important than their ego. It was 2:07 in the morning when my wife told me she had found someone better. I remember the exact minute because the blue digits on the microwave were the brightest thing in the kitchen, and because I had been standing there in my socks, warming up leftover red beans and rice in a chip bowl from my mother's old cabinet set. Outside, January sleet tapped against the back steps of our brick duplex in St. Louis. Inside, the refrigerator hummed, the heater rattled, and my marriage ended with my wife leaning against the counter like she was making a routine announcement. "I found someone better," she said again when I did not answer right away. Not louder, just clearer. My wife, Janine, always believed repetition gave her control. She was 38, sharp-featured, elegant even when she was angry. The kind of woman who folded grocery bags into neat triangles and alphabetized spices to calm herself down. She worked at a nonprofit museum downtown and spoke like she was constantly editing herself for a board meeting. She looked polished even then, in cream pajamas and gold hoops, with her hair wrapped in a burgundy scarf. I looked like a man who had stayed up too late paying electric bills. I carried my bowl to the table and sat down before I answered. That bothered her immediately. Janine preferred an audience that moved on cue. "Do you hear me, Ellis?" she asked. I nodded, blew across the spoon, and tasted the rice. Too much smoke from the sausage, not enough salt. My hands were steady, which surprised even me. "I hear you," I said. She waited for the crash. A question, a protest, some loud proof that I was stunned. Instead, she got me setting the spoon down carefully on the napkin beside the bowl. "Before we go any further, tell me in the comments right now, if your spouse woke you up at 2 a.m. and said, 'I found someone better,' would you stay calm or would you walk away on the spot? If this kind of real emotional relationship drama pulls you in, hit like, share this story with somebody who loves powerful storytelling, and subscribe for more stories like this." "That is all you have to say?" she asked. Her chin lifted in that familiar way, the one that used to fool me into thinking confidence and honesty were cousins. "You said you found someone better." I told her. "You did not say you wanted discussion. You said you wanted me to know." I watched her face change when she realized I was not going to do the work of giving her drama. That was the moment she moved from rehearsed to uneasy. She crossed her arms, uncrossed them, touched one hoop, looked toward the hallway as if she might still be able to restart the scene. If this had happened 6 months earlier, I would have tried to fix it before she finished the sentence. That was my flaw. I believed patience was holy. My father, a deacon on the north side, used to say a steady man can calm a burning room. I built my whole life around that line. I ran a small municipal repair subcontracting business, spent my days dealing with delayed permits, cracked sidewalks, city inspectors, and men who cursed first and thought later. By the time I got home, I believed calm was a skill that could save anything. It turns out calm can also hide how much you have already lost. Janine pulled out the chair across from me, but did not sit. "You are acting strange," she said. "No," I said. "I am acting tired." That made her laugh once, sharp and offended. The sound bounced off the cabinets and died. "You do not want to know who?" she asked. "Not particularly." That answer landed harder than yelling would have. She stared at me long enough for the heater to kick on again. "So that is it," she said. 10 years, and you are just going to sit there eating leftovers?" I looked at the bowl, then up at her. "Janine, you picked the hour." She hated when I was precise. Precision cornered her. Generalities were where she could float. She sat down at last, but only on the edge of the chair, as if commitment to the seat might be mistaken for weakness. "This did not come out of nowhere," she said. That part was true. Our problems had not arrived in a dramatic bundle. They had come in thin layers. Missed eye contact. Her phone tilted away from me. Dinners went cold because she said she ate after a late meeting. That slight impatience in her voice whenever I asked a basic question. You do not notice your roof is failing all at once. First you see the stain. The first stain, for me, was Labor Day at my aunt's house in Gary, Indiana. My family does a fish fry every year, even when the weather turns rude. My cousin set up folding tables in the garage. Somebody drags out a card table. Children run in and out with wet sneakers. And the older women argue over potato salad like judges on a cooking show. Janine had always loved those gatherings, or at least she used to act like she did. That year she spent half the afternoon texting with her face turned toward the driveway. When my Aunt Rochelle asked her to taste the greens, Janine barely looked up. On the ride back to St. Louis, she said my family was a lot and rolled the window down even though the air was cold. That was not like her. Janine could be critical, but she was usually strategic about it. A lot was sloppy. What happened today? I asked. Nothing happened, she said. I am just thinking. I remember the orange construction barrels along Interstate 70 blurring past us, and the gospel station fading in and out. I almost pushed harder, but I made decision one that night. I let it go because I thought rest would make her kinder in the morning. Rest did not make her kinder. It made her more certain. Over the next few weeks, Janine started talking about a man from work named Malcolm Reed. He was in development, she said, good with donors, younger than us by a few years. Always dressed like he had stepped out of one of those magazine spreads meant to sell watches and certainty. She would bring him up casually, too casually. Malcolm says the museum should be doing more community nights. Malcolm has this theory about leadership. Malcolm noticed my presentation before anybody else did. His name started showing up in our house like a leak we both pretended not to see. I met Malcolm once at the museum's autumn fundraiser. It was held under a giant tent behind the building, near a row of bare sycamore trees strung with lights. The caterers passed around crab cakes on tiny spoons, and a jazz trio played standards too softly for anybody to really hear. Malcolm shook my hand with the exact pressure men use when they want to communicate polish instead of warmth. He was handsome, sure, fine coat, fine teeth, easy smile. He called Janine J. without asking whether he had earned that privilege. Still, nothing in his face told me he was carrying on an affair with my wife. What I did see that night was Janine changing shape around him. Her laugh lifted higher. Her posture straightened. She touched the base of her neck every time he approached. I knew that gesture. It was her tell from years back when she was interviewing for jobs or trying to impress women she secretly envied. She became shinier around people who fed her idea of herself. I drove us home in silence through the Central West End, past bookstores closed for the night, and little pools of lamplight on wet pavement. She stared out the passenger window and smiled at a message she thought I did not notice. At home, I stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth while she removed her earrings, one by one, looking at herself in the mirror over my shoulder. You were quiet tonight, she said. Was I asked. You do not really fit in that world, she said, and then, as if she wanted to soften it, she added, it is not a bad thing. You are just different. I rinsed my mouth and looked at her reflection. There are sentences that do not sound cruel until they sit with you overnight. That was one of them. The difference was not an observation. It was a ranking. I should tell you something true about myself. I am not the man who flips a table when he feels disrespected. I am the man who goes quiet and starts measuring load-bearing beams in his head. My first instinct is always evaluation. What failed? When did it start? Can it be repaired? And what will the repair cost? That has served me well in work and badly in love. People will use your patience as a waiting room for behavior they never intended to change. I spent too much of that fall telling myself Janine was stressed, dissatisfied with work, insecure about turning 40 next year. November came in gray and impatient. I started leaving early for job sites near University City, scraping frost from the windshield in the dark, while Janine slept under the heated blanket. She loved more than she loved most people. She had picked up a new habit by then. Every morning, before even saying good morning, She checked her phone and smiled or frowned based on something I was clearly not meant to be part of. One Tuesday, I poured her coffee exactly how she liked it, with cinnamon and a little oat milk, and she did not touch it. She was too busy typing. "Who are you smiling at?" I asked. "Nobody," she said too fast. "Work stuff." Then she took the mug, sipped once, and winced because it had gone lukewarm while she was pretending not to lie. That same week, I got a call from my younger sister, Patrice, who never gossips unless she believes silence would be a mistake. She had gone to the museum for a school board event with her principal and happened to see Janine in the lobby after hours. She was not doing anything wild, Patrice said carefully, but she was sitting real close to a man in a blue turtleneck, and when I came over, she jumped like I caught her cheating. I thanked Patrice and said I would handle it. Then I sat in my truck outside Crown Candy Kitchen with the engine off for 10 minutes, staring at the steamed-up windshield. Decision 2 came there. I could have driven straight downtown and confronted Janine at work. I could have demanded names, explanations, phone passwords, the whole ugly collection of emergency evidence people go hunting for when dignity starts slipping. I chose not to, not because I was weak, because I wanted truth, not theater. Somebody cornered can always become a better liar. I decided to watch longer, and that choice cost me pride, but bought me clarity. The clarity came from places I did not expect. Mr. Holloway, our barber on Del Mar, keeps one television on sports and another on mute with closed captions because he says silence reveals a man's face. I was in his chair one Saturday getting a trim when I heard 2 women by the front window talking about the museum gala and some young fundraiser who had gotten engaged over Christmas. Tall one of them said, "Fine little fiancé from Nashville. They're always posting brunch pictures." Malcolm, I kept my eyes on myself in the mirror and said nothing, but the room suddenly felt much warmer. That afternoon, I came home and found Janine steaming a blouse at the laundry room door, humming like a woman in a commercial. "What are your plans tonight?" I asked. "Girls from work," she said. "Late dinner in Clayton." She did not look up. "Including Malcolm?" I asked. The steamer stopped. For 1 second, just one, she froze. Then she started again. "Do not do that," she said. "Do what?" "Ask questions like you already made me feel guilty." I nearly laughed because guilt had already moved into the house and started paying utilities. Instead, I said, "Then answer it plainly." She did not. "It is a group thing," she said finally. "You are being paranoid." That word angered me more than I let her see. Paranoid is what people call pattern recognition when the pattern makes them uncomfortable. She left 40 minutes later in a camel coat and black boots, wearing the perfume she only used for fundraisers and funerals. I stood at the living room window after her taillights disappeared and noticed the tiny ceramic church on our mantel, the one she bought from a Mississippi craft fair the summer we got engaged. Its steeple had chipped, and I had never repaired it. Some damage becomes part of the object. Around that time, I started sleeping in pieces, not because I was afraid she was gone, but because every sound in the house felt like a message. Her late key in the door, her shower at midnight, the drawer of her vanity closed softly when she thought I was asleep. One Sunday in December, after service at our church in Baden, Pastor Green preached about the danger of feeding your appetites with borrowed attention. Janine sat beside me in a cream suit, nodding at all the right moments. I remember thinking how frightening it is when somebody can recognize the truth only in public language. I almost told Pastor Green everything after service. He was standing near the fellowship hall coffee urn, stirring powdered creamer into a paper cup, his collar slightly crooked like always. He has known me since I was a teenager, knew my father, knew the stubbornness in our family, and the way we call it loyalty when we were trying to sound noble. I opened my mouth and then shut it. I chose silence again. Part of me did not want counsel. I wanted Janine to stop on her own. I wanted her to walk back to herself without me dragging her there like a parent. The strangest thing about betrayal is how normal the world stays around it. The bus still hissed to a stop on the corner every morning. The lady at the corner store still called me baby when I bought orange juice and mints. Children still dragged backpacks through old snow on the sidewalks. I still had invoices to send and subcontractors to chase. Meanwhile, inside my chest, everything had become accounting. What did she say? What did she mean? What did I ignore because I preferred the version of marriage where patience earns you honesty? By New Year's, even my body understood before my mind fully admitted it. Then came the part Janine never imagined I would learn. Early in January, I was at a diner near Maplewood called Busy Bee, meeting a city contact for breakfast about a retaining wall project. The waitress kept refilling coffee without asking, and the place smelled like onions and pancake syrup. At the counter, two women from the museum were talking louder than they realized. I recognized one of them as Janine's colleague, Mrs. Coles, a woman with silver braids and the face of somebody who misses nothing. She said, plain as day, Janine made that whole Malcolm fantasy up in her own head. I did not move. My contact was late, and God must have known I needed that. The other woman laughed softly, not unkindly. It is embarrassing, she said. He has been wearing his fiancée's ring on a chain under his shirt. Everybody knows they are back together. Mrs. Coles shook her head. Malcolm is friendly with everybody. Janine read a hymn to hello. That sentence settled into me like cold water. So this was not even an affair in the clean, ugly sense. It was worse. My wife had built a whole private ladder out of attention and climbed it alone. I went home after breakfast instead of to the office. The winter sun was hard and white against the snowbanks, and every stoplight felt delayed on purpose. I sat in the driveway without cutting the engine for several minutes. I should tell you there is a kind of humiliation that has nothing to do with being left and everything to do with realizing your spouse would trade your actual life together for a fantasy that was not even available. I felt anger then, yes, but also pity. Janine was not standing in strength. She was standing in desperation and calling it self-discovery. That same afternoon, I called a lawyer named Adrian Pike whose office sat above a tax service near Forest Park Parkway. She wore plum lipstick, kept framed degrees on one wall and photographs of her twins on the other, and listened without interrupting. I respected that. When I finished, she folded her hands and said, "You do not need to decide today whether to file, but you do need to decide whether you are willing to be handled while she figures herself out." I left her office with separation papers drafted but not filed, tucked inside a manila envelope in my briefcase. My answer was not finished, but it had started. From that day on, something in me leveled out. Not softened, not healed, leveled. I stopped asking Janine where she had been. I stopped trying to catch her in honesty. I returned to my routines. Early mornings, work boots by the radiator. Wednesday lunch with my mother at a soul food spot on Natural Bridge. Saturday vacuuming with old Anita Baker playing low. Janine noticed a change immediately because people always notice when their access to your reactions gets revoked. "You are distant," she said one evening while loading the dishwasher. "No," I told her. "I am accurate." She stared at me like accuracy was an insult. "You know what your problem is?" she said. "You think being decent is enough." I dried a plate and set it in the cabinet. "It used to be enough for you." She scoffed. "That is exactly what I mean. You do not evolve." I remember looking at the kitchen clock then. 8:14, a perfectly ordinary moment for a sentence that should have broken me. Instead, it clarified something else. Janine did not want growth. She wanted stimulation. She wanted to feel reflected in somebody's admiration, even if she had to invent the mirror herself. In early February, the museum held a Black History Community Night, and Janine asked if I was coming. Her tone was almost testing, as if she wanted proof I would still show up for her life no matter how she had treated mine. I said no. That was decision 3, though she never knew how much sat behind it. I could have gone, stood in a blazer near the refreshments, and let everybody see the husband still trying. Instead, I stayed home, cooked catfish, called my cousin Jerome in Milwaukee, and admitted out loud for the first time that my marriage might already be over. Jerome did not give speeches. He never has. He fixes freight elevators and speaks in practical lines. "Brother," he said, "the question is not whether she is confused. The question is what confusion gives her permission to do to you. That helped more than any sermon I heard all winter. Permission. Janine had been using uncertainty like a hall pass to compare me, to withdraw tenderness, to flirt with escape, to make me stand trial without ever telling me the charge. When I hung up, I stood at the sink washing grease in the skillet and knew I was closer to leaving than forgiving. The final week before that 2 a.m. kitchen scene was weirdly peaceful. That is the part people never believe. Janine was almost pleasant. She asked whether I wanted sweet potatoes with dinner. She folded my T-shirts while watching a home renovation show. She laughed at a joke from a radio host in the car. I think, in hindsight, she had started sensing Malcolm was not going to become her next chapter, and she was drifting back toward me without confession, hoping I would accept her return as naturally as I had absorbed her distance. That is another danger. People will come back to the dock they disrespected if the sea scares them. On the Thursday before it happened, I found one of her legal pads on the den desk. Janine had a habit of making lists in 2 columns, one labeled immediate and the other eventually. It was one of the reasons she did so well at work. Under eventually, I saw a new apartment, travel, separate finances. There was no name on the page, but there did not need to be. I put the pad back exactly where I found it. I was no longer looking for proof. I was collecting confirmation. By then I had learned there is a difference, and only one of them can set you free. Then came that night, or morning, really. I had been up late finishing estimates for a school masonry repair job on the south side. The house was dim except for the stove light over the sink. Janine had gone to bed around midnight after saying she was tired. At 1:50, I heard her moving upstairs, not like somebody half asleep, but like somebody pacing and deciding. When she came down, she did not look tired at all. She looked arranged. That is how I knew whatever she was about to say had been practiced in the bathroom mirror while I was downstairs calculating labor costs. I found someone better, she said, and then, because she was still trying to direct me, she added, I did not want to keep pretending. I looked at her and saw not just my wife, but a person standing on a ledge made of pride. Even then, part of me wanted to save her from the jump. I could have chosen gentleness. I could have said Malcolm's name, told her I knew he was engaged, told her this whole performance was built on bad information. Instead, I made decision 4. I said, then sit down because I need to tell you something too. She frowned like she had misheard me. Excuse me, she said. I pointed to the chair. Sit down. My voice was not loud, but it had a final quality I had not used with her before. She sat. That was a line from the title of this story. But what mattered was not the command. It was the fact that she obeyed it. For months, she had been speaking to me like a man in the waiting room of his own marriage. At that moment, she heard the difference. I walked to the hall closet, reached behind the folded quilts, and took out my briefcase. When I placed a manila envelope on the table, she looked from it to me, confused. What is that? She asked. My reply, I said. She did not touch it at first. Her fingers just hovered over the edge like the paper might shock her. Open it, I told her. Outside, a truck dragged chains somewhere down the avenue, and the sound scraped through the dark. Inside, Janine slid the papers out and scanned the first page. Her face changed in stages. Annoyance, concentration, disbelief, then the real thing, fear. These are separation papers, she whispered. Drafted 2 weeks ago, I said. She looked at the date and sat back so fast the chair legs squealed across the floor. 2 weeks, she said. Before tonight? I nodded. Before the speech. Before your announcement. Before your dramatic little ranking system. She shook her head. Why would you do this without talking to me? That question almost made me laugh, but there was nothing funny in me. I did talk to you, I said. Every time I asked what was wrong, and you called me paranoid. Every time I reached for honesty, and you handed me a posture. Every time you wanted me to compete with a ghost instead of face my wife. Her eyes filled then, but I was not moved by tears that arrived only after paperwork. It is not what you think, she said. Then tell me what it is. I answered, all the way, not halfway. She pressed both palms flat on the table, a habit from her museum meetings when she was trying to keep her voice even. I felt invisible, she said. At work, at home, in myself. Malcolm paid attention. He listened. I let that sit for a second. He listened like a co-worker. I said, "You built the rest. I know about his fiancée." Her mouth opened, closed. Then she just stared. "Who told you?" she asked. "It does not matter." "It does to me." "No," I said quietly. "What matters to you is that your fantasy had witnesses." That line made her look away. There was shame in her face then, but also anger because shame rarely travels alone. "You think you are perfect?" she snapped. "You think you never fail me?" There it was. The turn. The old move from confession to redistribution. I had seen it before. Usually that was where I started defending myself, listing what I did, how hard I worked, how faithful I had been. This time I did not chase or detour. "I have failed you in ordinary ways," I said. "Working too much, missing cues, assuming steadiness felt like love on your side because it was love on mine. But I never auditioned for another life while sleeping beside you." That landed. She covered her face with both hands and breathed into her palms. The room went quiet except for the heater and the soft click of sleet at the back window. "I thought you would fight harder," she said finally, voice muffled. "That is your misunderstanding." I told her. "You confuse my loyalty with consent. Those are not the same thing." She dropped her hands and looked at me as if she was seeing me from far away. "So what now?" she asked. I leaned back in the chair and studied the woman I had loved since we met at a neighborhood voter registration drive in our 20s, when she wore a yellow dress and argued with a city clerk over missing forms. I loved her ambition, her orderliness, the way she cried at old gospel songs and terrible documentaries about school closures. Love had not vanished. That is what made the room hard to sit in. "Now," I said, "you tell me whether you want me or just the safety of being wanted." Janine started crying in earnest then. Not loud, not cinematic. The kind of crying that sounds like somebody trying not to drown in front of another person. "I do not know," she said. I appreciated the honesty and hated it at the same time. "Thank you," I said. She blinked at me through tears, confused by my tone. "For what?" "For finally telling the truth before I built my whole future around another lie." She looked down at the papers again, and I could almost see the calculations moving behind her eyes. Rent, reputation, family, pride, loneliness, grief. Consequences make philosophers selfish. "Do not tell my mother yet," she said. That was her first practical concern. Not us, not me, her mother, a stern retired nurse in Peoria who thought I hung the moon and believed Janine married above her temper. "I was not planning to make announcements at 2 a.m, I said. She winced. Then, in a voice so small I barely recognized it, she said, "Did you ever stop loving me?" I thought about lying to make it easier on both of us. But easier is how we got there. "No," I said. "I stopped trusting the version of love you were offering back." Dawn did not come for another 4 hours, but the night had already turned. Janine asked if I was filing immediately. I told her no, not that morning. The papers were not a threat. They were a boundary. That difference mattered to me. I was not trying to scare her into affection. I was showing her that I had finally accepted the cost of staying available to somebody who kept me on emotional layaway. She nodded slowly, gripping the envelope like it might disappear. "Can I fix this?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "But fixing it starts with a truth you can stand in when nobody is flattering you." We did not sleep. Around 5, I made coffee. Out of habit, I poured her a cup too, then almost laughed at the old reflex. She accepted it with both hands like a peace offering she was not sure she deserved. Through the kitchen window, the alley was turning gray. Trash bins lined up beside patches of dirty snow. A city bus sighed at the corner. Somewhere down the block, a man started his car and let it idle too long. St. Louis was waking up, and I was sitting across from my wife feeling older than I had the night before. Over the next month, consequences unfolded the way they do in real life. Unevenly. Janine told her mother and got silent for 2 days. She started individual counseling and came home exhausted from having to describe herself without decorations. Malcolm transferred to another department after his fiancée moved to town, and Janine had to stand in the plainness of that fact every day at work. I moved into the den and bought a better mattress for the pull-out sofa. We met twice with a marriage counselor in Richmond Heights who asked brutal, useful questions. Nobody transformed overnight. Nobody got to be the hero of their own version. I made choices too. I did not file immediately, though I kept the papers current. I told Janine I would not live in a house where my reality had to compete with her boredom. I stopped covering for her at family events. When Aunt Rochelle asked why Janine missed Sunday dinner, I said, "We are having a hard season," and left it there. I also admitted my own failures in counseling without using them to cancel hers. I had hidden inside usefulness for years. Paid bills, fixed doors, reheated leftovers. Called that intimacy. The truth was, I had been present and still unavailable in ways that mattered. Spring came slowly. Red buds opened along the streets, and rain washed the salt from the curbs. Janine became quieter, less polished, more honest, I think, though honesty on a delayed schedule still leaves damage. One evening in April, she stood in the doorway of the den while I was oiling my father's old domino table, the one I keep even though one leg is shorter than the others. "I was cruel to you," she said. No big speech behind it. No self-defense. Just that sentence. I looked up and said, "Yes, you were." It was the cleanest exchange we had managed in months. If this story stayed with you, let me know in the comments. Did Ellis do the right thing by staying calm and setting a boundary, or should he have walked away for good the moment the truth came out? Like this video. Share it with someone who understands that loyalty without respect becomes pain, and subscribe for more original stories like this, because the next one might hit even closer to home. We are not back together in the shiny way stories like to end. We are not divorced either, at least not as I tell this. We are in that sober middle place where the truth has finally arrived, and both people have to decide whether they are strong enough to live with it. Sometimes Janine sits across from me at the kitchen table and looks like the woman I married before applause and fantasy got into her bloodstream. Sometimes I look at her and feel only caution, but I still remember that night at 2:07, and I am grateful for one thing. When she said she found someone better, I finally chose myself. What stays with me is not just Janine's sentence. It is the pattern around it. The museum co-worker she romanticized, the legal pad with separate finances. On it, the way truth only showed up after papers hit the table. A boundary is not revenge. It is the moment you stop financing someone else's confusion with your dignity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is sit still, tell the truth plainly, and let consequences speak in their own voice that the Yendi